Blog Talk Radio.
Well, folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Willies, your host. Thank you very much for spending this 1 hour with me discussing what we discuss here, real politics, truths, realities, not based on fallacies. I do appreciate your time. What a week this was, eh? What a week this was. Senor Benjamin Netanyahu won his election. He won an election by scaring folks to death. He won that election by doing something that he probably learned from us. Interesting enough, I think he one-upped us. Because when we're doing things here, we have a tendency to sugarcoat what we're really trying to say. Netanyahu didn't. Netanyahu did exactly what he wanted to do. He scared folks to death. And guess what? It worked. This man was losing in the polls. And you know what? Everybody started to say things like, oh, the polls were wrong. These guys, how could they have messed up the polls the way that they did? Well, they messed up the polls the way they did, not that they really messed it up. It's that being a left and right country, if you will, Netanyahu's last punch was able to peel off people from the parties on the right to consolidate with him for the fear of, you know what? The Arabs are coming. The Arabs are coming. I have one blog post that I wanted to read on Paul Krugman, but before, this story was so what I think is so important that I wanted to read. I'm going to read it real fast. The blog post that it was going to be my blog of the week at Daily Coast, but I decided to change it and just kind of talk a little bit about it here first. So before we go into Krugman, let me read this one real fast. I titled it Israeli Election, an Interesting Reflection of and on America. And it goes as follows. Benjamin Netanyahu won an election very few expected him to win. Tactics he used should open the eyes of many as Israel is upheld as a moral democracy in the Middle East. Jon Stewart did a masterful job inferring a very bad lesson that was likely learned by some on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's big win. His satire hit a nerve because he effectively noted that Netanyahu one-upped America's own racist politics. Unfortunately, what Netanyahu did to win was being telegraphed throughout Election Day for right-wing politicians in the U.S. and throughout the world to see. The U.S. news media played up Benjamin Netanyahu's win as if he was running against Obama. Last night, Benjamin Netanyahu apparently defeated Barack Obama and the Palestinians, Jon Stewart said. Finally, Republicans found a conservative that could beat Obama. Stewart mocked all the news channels that were hyperventilating because President Obama had not conceded or called Netanyahu to congratulate him on his victory. You find it interesting that a foreign country's prime minister who came to Congress against the White House wishes to, you know what, on a nuclear deal the president spent years working on, wouldn't receive an immediate post-election attaboy? Jon Stewart asked. Maybe the president is in shock. You know, a lot of people didn't think Netanyahu was going to win this one. Netanyahu changed the subject effectively. Netanyahu decided to go full right. He approached to the most inner fears of Israelis. He made Israeli Arab scapegoats. He followed the modus operandi that Republicans use in several states. Fear those others. How dare you, Jon Stewart asked. How dare you gin up racist fears of minority turnout for short-term political gain. That is our thing, not the Israeli thing. That's our thing. He was making fun of it, but here's the serious part, folks. Benjamin Netanyahu learned well from our right-wing politics, but Stewart pointed out something a bit more sinister. You see, he used Mitt Romney's 47% comment to illustrate what Netanyahu really learned from American politics. He learned that if you are going to go against the people that are not a majority and that some may fear, you must double down with conviction. Force the human carnality of fear to emerge from the voters you need. In other words, as Stewart said, go in or go home. Mitt Romney went home. He didn't go all in, so he lost, right? His fear didn't quite work because it wasn't quite carnal enough. The similarities between the Israeli right and the American right are more than subtle. A racist tenet is existential for their survival, as their core beliefs are anathema across all groups. It is a smoke and mirrors game in which they must gin up a threat a composite majority can coalesce around. In Israel, it is the Arabs. In America, it is the black, brown, and the immigrant, and anybody who is really what we call effectively powerless. Not powerless, but effectively powerless. This is an affront to democracy for all of us, given that it uses a fallacy to elect those that ultimately do not have the best interests of the electors at hand. In Israel, it elicits a deeper question. Can a country that is established as a Jewish state really be a democracy? American political-driven racism is more about a party keeping power. Black, brown, and other minorities can integrate themselves into the American right. In fact, many have. So it's a different dynamic. One is a dynamic of power. One is a dynamic of entire and complete exclusion. Think about that, folks. That is deep. In America, anybody can integrate themselves into any party. Doesn't matter the tenets. They can integrate themselves into any party and follow that ideology and become truly representative, an honorary representative of all that party entails. Ben Carson is very well accepted within the vast majority of the Republican Party, even though the tenets that he supports for are entirely anathema to the people like him or to the people who use the path that he used for success. Think about that. However, that's not true in motherland Israel. A Jewish state seems anathema to a democratic state for anyone but Jews. When one speaks about the unbreakable bond between Israel and America, one must understand that it is an implicit acknowledgement that it has little to do with democracy and instead all to do with the projection of America's economic system. We overthrew the democratically elected leader of Iran and installed the Shah. We attempted to overthrow Venezuela's democratically elected Hugo Chavez, and we are attempting to overthrow their newly elected leader, Nicolas Maduro, in an attempt to reconstitute a government run by the Venezuelan plutocracy. Think about that, folks. The lessons from the Israeli election are stark. Our reaction to the election are starker. That wasn't the topic of today's, but after I wrote that and I got some comments about it, I felt I really needed to put it out there. 732, I'm coming to you right after I do my blog for good old Paul Krugman, because this is really the topic of the show, but of course you guys can determine whether you want to move on to something else. I'll read this one rather quickly, but it's important. It's called Paul Krugman Slams Fraudulent GOP Budgets Urging Populist Anger. And that is what I'm hoping for. When we talk about populist anger, we're not talking about an anger that is a violent anger or whatever. We're talking about a resolve to get something done, a resolve to be positive, a resolve to really start taking our government back. Not in the realm of the Tea Party. We want to take our government back because, all those other people are screwing with our government. We're talking about really being integrated in the government. All people, all sides, everybody, left, right, middle, anarchists, everybody. Engagement. Anyhow, continuing. Paul Krugman's piece, $1 trillion fraudster, in the New York Times on the Republican budget is a must-read, and I have the link within the blog post for that as well, my dear friends. The fraud perpetrated on the American citizenry may actually fit the definition of being traitorous. It would destroy this nation. This is what he initially wrote in his piece. By now, it's a Republican Party tradition. Every year, the party produces a budget that allegedly slashes deficits, but contain a $1 trillion magic asterisk, a line that promises huge spending cuts and or revenue increases, but without explaining where the money is supposed to come from. But the just released budgets from the House and Senate majorities break new ground. Each contains not one, but $2 trillion magic asterisks, one on spending and one on revenue. And that's actually an understatement. If either budget were to become law, it would leave the federal government several $1 trillion deeper in debt that claimed, and that's just in the first decade. Paul Krugman did not mince word. The Nobel Prize winning economist has had enough. This is what he said. The modern GOP raw fiscal dishonesty is something new in American politics, and that's telling us something important about what has happened to half of our political spectrum. So where exactly is the morality, dishonesty, and deception in the House and Senate Republican budgets? It doubles the number of Americans without health insurance as it kills Obamacare. There are savage cuts in food stamps and Medicaid. It claims another $1 trillion of unspecified cuts, which could only come from the Medicare and Social Security. Paul Krugman picked up on the theme that in our time, this vast fiscal and policy deception is now almost exclusively on the right. It's very important to realize that this isn't normal behavior. The George W. Bush administration was no slouch when it came to deceptive presentation of tax plans, but it was never this blatant. And the Obama administration has been remarkably scrupulous in its fiscal pronouncements. He echoes President Obama's recent chiding of Republican disingenuous pronouncements when he enumerated Obama's policies that reduced health care costs, expenditures, half in the budget deficit, and more. Krugman made the following observation that should give us all pause. So, no, outrageous fiscal mendacity is neither historically normal nor bipartisan. It's a modern Republican thing. And the question we should ask is why? But I'm partial to a more cynical explanation. Think about that. Think about what these budgets would do if you ignore the mysterious trillions in unspecified spending cuts and revenue enhancements. What you're left with is huge transfers of income from the poor and the working class, who would see severe benefit cuts, to the rich, who would see big tax cuts. And the simplest way to understand these budgets is surely to suppose that they are intended to do what they do, in fact, actually do make the richer and ordinary families poorer. Paul Krugman ends his piece almost begging for an eruption of populist anger. Look, I know that it's hard to keep up the outrage after so many years of fiscal fraudulence. But please try. We're looking at an enormous, destructive con job. And you would be you should be very, very angry. Look, Americans must start playing a role in the budgetary process. There is the people's budget one can latch on to. It is a budget that invests in people while really bringing our budget deficits under control. There are no smoke, mirrors, deception, dishonesty or immorality within. So, folks, what do you think? Let me start with my, 732, who do I have the honor of speaking with?
Hey, Berto, John from Jersey.
John from Jersey. Talk to me, my dear John from Jersey.
Hey, how you been? Well, I guess, I even heard stuff on Bill Maher, similar. I guess whatever, the United Nations was created.
Oh, hold on. Let me ask you to hold, John from Jersey, let me ask you to hold one quick second. I want to make an announcement here for Greg Russack, first of all. Please go to our Coffee Party page or the Coffee Party Facebook page and look for the TPP post, and please sign the TPP post petition. We need it badly. We need to start taking the TPP seriously. So I'll mention that a little later again, but thanks for reminding me, Greg. Okay, come on in, John.
Okay, yeah, Bill Maher pretty much talked about the same kind of thing as you said the Daily Show was talking about. The United Nations was created basically after World War II, which whatever we thought our allies, five powers that had veto power and all that. We tried to, I guess, bring the Russians more in kind of thing, and Chinese and all that. Of course, right after the war, they were really kind of like our allies. And a lot of people thought they were going to, go by the wayside, and people like Patton and others thought they were going to head the other way and not become our allies and all that. But you were discussing let's say more of like whatever with Iran and all that we we weren't concerned with basically democracy.
Oh, you're talking about my first post. You're talking about the first post. That's great. I like that topic as well. So yeah, let me. The thing with Iran is in 1953 they had an elected leader. I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but we overthrew him, and this is how we've cascaded into where we're at right now.
Right. He wanted to basically tell the British that because of the oil, that they wanted to nationalize the oil, and but because we were the drillers, the British, and us and all, but especially the British at that time, were drilling mostly there. They came to the CIA and basically, they needed to outroot him, and we're there overseas because of economic. It has nothing to do with democracy and all that. That's basically.
Right now, I wish Americans were like yourself, who understood that. You can be a full red-blooded, glory, glory, hallelujah American and still accept the truth of the matter. We went out there and we destabilized the region because we wanted the region's oil. It's that simple, and a lot of what we're seeing. Look, first and foremost, we protect America. There's no doubt about that. All of us are Americans.
More than it.
Right. We are going to protect our interests no matter what. We all are doing that because we are Americans. However, we also need to be honest with how we've gotten here. We have to be honest as to why people are, Bush and all these guys love to say they hate us because they hate our freedom. They don't hate us because they hate our freedom. They hate us because of a lot of the things we do under the tenets of capitalism and our businesses overseas. Sadly, Americans are very, very unknowledgeable about all the things that our businessmen go overseas to do. Me being a foreign extract before being a naturalized citizen, I was able to see firsthand what it looks like when a power, and this isn't even just an American thing. This just happened to be something strong countries versus weak countries, or superpowers versus non-superpower. America in this hemisphere has walked into every single Central American and South American country and imposed its will. and not only imposed this will, but ensured that it didn't have to deal with most of the people. It simply wanted to deal with dictators who dealt with the people. So they had one point of view to get it done, and all of that is expanded into, if we go to the Middle East and we see how all these people are. None of these folks are anti-American, and we're going to get into Krugman afterwards. But I just wanted to make this point: none of these people are anti-American. Americans are some of the most loved people around the world because they like the vibrancy that we have in this spirit, the way we do things. What they are very much against is the power plays that not the average American citizen, but the plutocracy puts on over there, supported by the government in form of a strong military that just blow crap up when they don't abide. I mean, when Noriega was your ultimate capitalist. Americans loved their drugs. Noriega was making it easy for Americans to get their drugs. He was fulfilling a demand. We took him out. And how did we take him out? We took him out, and to get him, we also took out 10,000 Panamanians. 10,000 Panamanians buried in a big hole. Well, it's not in one big hole, in several big holes, but nobody in America sees that. But you know what? A lot of other people see that, and that is what they react to. But anyway, sorry for the long monologue. Continue, please.
Yeah, prime example is Libya. I mean, like with Gaddafi, when he wasn't playing ball with us and the Europeans, because mostly Libya was giving their oil to England, France, Belgium, and those countries, because it all makes sense on a scale, worldwide scale, like of oil, right? So, like, we, the United States, get only a certain smaller percentage now of oil directly from the Middle East. Why? Because on a scale of where ships have to go back and forth, because of, the way that the markets are and such, that economically it makes more sense that, first of all, prices are controlled by the dollar for oil, right? But more sense that, the United States only needs a certain percentage from the Middle East. Then we're getting it from other countries nearby, Gulf of Mexico,
Venezuela.
Everywhere else. But Venezuela, that kind of thing. It makes more sense because the ships traveling back and forth economically, it's better off, right? But of course, then here you had Libya was giving most of their oil to Western Europe, and when they weren't playing ball, we went after them, right? Because those are our allies. But then later, there was Lockerbie, so he wasn't playing ball. But then later, McCain and all of them, and most of them were like as if they were playing ball with us and our European allies. We had no problem making peace with him again, right? They, forced him just, hey, go sign the treaty, say you're sorry, pay some money, you're sorry about Lockerbie, But then when he came back out again, where he wasn't playing ball with us and the Europeans, we went after him. And how was he not playing ball? Well, accordingly, he wasn't playing ball by when he started saying, because of Libya was trying to get most of the gold, from parts of Africa, and he was trying to unite the African and Arab nations because our economic is based upon our currency. But what they were trying to do was he was trying to and the percentage of gold that they have in comparison to the people, and compare our people, amount of people we have, and the gold that we have in reserves. So he was trying to coin a gold coin, and then have to where, monetary oil and other things would more be bought on that kind of gold currency, right?
Right.
Which
Look,
United States
John,
England had very little of it, and therefore we
right,
went
John,
after it.
I want to move on to the economics portion, but let me tell you, you're so right. And the thing about it is, that is one thing, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I think what we have to illustrate to Americans is whenever, the threats that we see as only military or otherwise is generally not the case. A lot of times we create military threats because of something we foresee. I mean, there's another example that I could use with you in Afghanistan. It turns out that Afghanistan has a whole lot of rare earths, okay? So don't think that one of the reasons we are making sure to have a foothold there is not to realize that the rare earths in Afghanistan is something that our corporations actually want. But I want to move on from the international
rare earths. You mean what do you mean? Mining and all that?
Yes, mining, deuterium, and these different types of rare earths that are used in the semiconductor industries and all these other industries that require these. There are a whole lot of that stored in the ground. Well, it's a part, just their not topography, but their geology. But anyhow, I want to move on to budgets, because Paul Krugman came out rather hard against Republicans. And one of the reasons he did so was mostly, I think, because the media has, we talk about the media being so ineffective, the media being so bad, and, people just think, well, you're just talking about it. But when you have two budgets, like what was released by the Republicans this week, and you have no serious coverage about the deceptive nature of those budgets, should tell you something about the state of our media and the state of the country altogether. And another thing, two stories of mine went viral this week. One story, or actually there were several, but two specifically. One was the story of the president going to Cleveland, and the president made a very important statement that the news media should have ran with it, but they ignored it almost entirely. They just had a blurb on it on the news, and it's been all forgotten. The president has been president for over 6 years. The policies of the president were established in the first 2 years when he had majorities in Congress and he could pass his policies. We're still living only under those particular sets of policies. In other words, for 4 years, we had no substantive economic policies effected in this country. Let's repeat that. For 4 years, we have had no substantive economic policies effected in this country. What we've had, everything done in the first 2 years, the President's Affordable Care Act, which took this 5 years to implement. We also had the stimulus, which took us out of the funk that we were in, and we had the bill to protect women's rights and the clean energy. All of this. Don't think this president didn't know he had to front load all of this crap. He had to front load all of these things, so much so that after his second year, you could read the reports that said this president had accomplished within his first and second year more than most presidents had accomplished in their entire 8 years in government. And he did that because he knew he had to do that and front-loaded while he had both houses of Congress and himself to get these things done. The effect of these policies is what we're still living under. Whether you like it or not, any success within the economy can be directly attributed to the policies that are in effect. And any failures that needs to be mitigated can be directly attributed to that which was not done. And why wasn't it done? So now, what the president did in Cleveland is he enumerated all the things that Republicans said would have happened because of the stimulus, Republicans said would happen because of the Obamacare bill, and all these other issues completely debunked. Completely debunked. And usually he doesn't brag about it, but this time he did. And then he said, now let's really have a discussion on policy. If you were working off of a previous ideology and that failed, and now you're working partially on mine, and the reason I'm saying partially is that we're still within the tenets of trickle-down economics. We're still working on trickle-down economics until we pass budgets similar to the budgets as described in the other blog I wrote called the People's Budget, which actually does things like making sure that all income is taxed at the same level, meaning we don't give investment income preferential treatment over the working man's income. Where in God's name would you do that? Why is it that a man sitting down watching his capital at a poolside drinking a cup of tea should pay less taxes on the generated income than that guy who busts his butt every day at work? Makes no sense. Things like that have been fixed within this budget that with the present Congress, both Republicans and Democrats alike won't look at it, the People's Budget. So what I'd like to grab at is, first of all, what do you think about the budget as presented? What do you think should be done? And do you think the president has the bragging rights he spoke about again in Cleveland? Do you think Paul Krugman makes a valid point, however partisan it may sound? John. And by the way, folks, the telephone number I didn't announce it is 646-929-2495. Again, that number is 646-929-2495. If you want to speak, please do press 1 so that you can have your say. Thank you very much. Yeah, John.
Yeah, I mean, it's a political game. They got to play it. You know, everybody plays it. You know, no matter what. Even in Bill Maher, they were talking about like you were talking about before, about the Arab kind of thing that the Prime Minister was playing out. You know, look, they all play it. They have to play it in order to try to win elections. So that's in regards to elections. You know, so if like
what
now,
about the budget?
No. Yeah, I'm going to go into that, but I'm just saying. Let's say, like as Republicans are doing with black voters, or sort of, you know, they trying to gain white voters to come out in droves. So they say kind of racial things, and then they say, you know, wow, we didn't really mean that kind of stuff, but they do it because for elections, you know, they're trying to win. But one thing I see is in regards to budgets and such, like here in New Jersey, we have a new replacement Goethals Bridge being built, and then we have high-speed rails that are going to go forward. You know, the president's budget is pretty balanced. You know, we are heading now finally into the new century, I guess, after he's sort of balanced, you know, fixing up things over the recent years, because we were in negative territories, you know, and the Republicans
yes, we were.
Even admit that we were in negative territories. But the thing is, you know, I see Bill Maher and watch that show, and okay, they'll say, but those numbers mean, you know, for like especially the numbers
unemployment.
for unemployment, they'll say, you know, that those are people who just don't even want to work anymore and that kind of thing. But, you know, if we had the same standards back then, and of course the numbers were worse, right? So we have the same standards that we're going about now in calculating unemployment as it is, okay? So if you say...
Wait, John, I want to interrupt you for one reason. And the reason I want to interrupt you for one reason.
If you say it's bad now, considering the way we calculate things, right? Yeah, maybe it is a little bit bad. But how much worse was it then, and considering we were calculating it the same way?
Exactly,
you know
but I think I want to make something known to people, because people get the misleading information from Fox News and, to be honest with you, from just the mainstream media. Here's a very important note. In disparaging the 5.5% unemployment rate that is much less than the 6% that Mitt Romney promised by 2016, it is important for people to note one thing. First of all, there's nothing devious about that. We are in the twilight years of many baby boomers, and if you remember, baby boomers was a whole bunch of people in a 10-year period or 10-year span, or something of that nature. They are starting to retire. Of course, because there are a lot more of them, they will not be seeking jobs. So that number reflects the passing of the baby boomers, the top baby boomers, from that huge employment base downwards. But the unemployment numbers take these calculations into effect. The only reason the media is making a big issue out of, that the actual employment pool is much smaller, is because they are very small thinkers. If you had a huge baby boom in the 40s and those people are now falling out of the market, of course you're going to have an employment rate participation decline, because it's not like these people are dying. They're just no longer working. They're not dying, they're retiring. So therefore they're not in the workforce. It doesn't take a whole lot of scientific or deep thinking to figure that out. What they should be, what even our Social Security system had mitigated for that. We were over collecting Social Security payments specifically because we knew this was going to happen. Of course, our great government that it is has found ways, because of lax taxation on the income side as opposed to the FICA side, has not collected the kinds of income and have used the monies that would have formed the bulk to keep Social Security afloat. Now, it's still afloat. But it would have been much better had we been a lot more efficient. So, folks, the one thing I want to get across there is you cannot listen to the media's trying to qualify the 5.5% unemployment rate. There's no qualification. The unemployment rate, the way it's calculated, is standard. It is 5.5%. All the other crap they want to put around, if they want to make it, hold on a second, John. Let me just say one other thing, sir. One thing they can speak about, and which they don't want to speak about too many times, except if it can disparage the president, is that they can speak about wages. But if they speak about wages and how the wages are not keeping up with inflation, or how the wages are not keeping up with productivity, it means that they have to go into the argument of minimum wages, and they have to go into the argument of wage inflation. Go ahead, John.
Well, yeah, they'd have to go into the argument of policy, and they don't want to go into that. They'll argue it a different way, which they even showed that on Bill Maher's show. That they had two Republicans on his panel and one Democrat. And, of course, they don't want to argue the policies on that in regards to wage earnings and such, like wage power.
Right.
But the standard for unemployment has been since 1948. It's the same. It's always been the same.
Right.
And if you really want to change it, you will maybe have three different types of calculations for unemployment. You'll have the better one, and then you'll have maybe another one, and then the old standard. Fine, because there's different ways to calculate it. So you could have three standards that we should show, and A, B, and C, and A should be the new, better, best way, and B, and then keep the old C, because we went on that standard. So show that continuing standard, but show today's better reflection and accuracy. But they want to play political games with it. That's why they'll never change it.
Right.
That's what I think.
But anyway, as far as this, let me see. I see Jack is here as well. Jack, come on into the discussion.
Okay. All right. First of all, Obama was not always correct. He made the mistake to talking about he could have had immigration reform back to the first 2 years too, but he just ignored it.
True.
We had a Democratic majority in the House and the Senate back in 08, 09, 10, up through 10. He could have had immigration done back then. He wanted to do that. He didn't do it. Number two, first thing I want to suggest, it's a tiny little step, but just remove the cap completely. Social Security.
Agreed.
Yeah, because why should people making over, say, $150,000 a year pay less than the Social Security? The maximum amount is something like $117,000. Why should they pay? Why should they not pay the whole damn amount into it?
Let me give an answer
as far as income tax goes. What?
There's a reason for that, and this was explained to me by one. I went to I don't remember the name of the thing, but it's about bringing back the middle class. And the reason that they set it up that way is that Social Security was never going to be considered it was a defined benefit. In other words, it was something that you paid into, and then you got a salary, if you will, out of it. And one of the reasons they didn't tax all the way up, it's because the idea wasn't as a general tax, because they believe a general tax could be changed and moved around. They wanted to have a formula that said everybody would get X amount of dollars up to some maximum. The problem is, however, that that's not how Social Security has evolved. We've used the Social Security monies to pay off bills. We've used the Social Security money for many other things. And above and beyond that, it is as a society, we should not be worried about, this is just a public held insurance policy. It should be a public benefit, a societal benefit. We have to change our thinking from the fear of somehow being equated as a socialist state by not having these types of society. That is what we have to. That is where we have to go. Go ahead, Jack. Continue, please.
Oh yeah, another thing is we worship oil. Worship the expendable fuels like oil and coal. I had a thing about like a tax on worship to do away with coal as a fuel. And it's about arguing about clean coal. Well, there is no such thing as clean coal. About that. And
let me back up. I want to stop you there. That's not fair, Jack. Let me tell you something. I am an environmentalist. I believe in all these things, but I tell you something that I think we have to. Personally, as an environmentalist as well, I don't want to be an ideologue. And what happens is, because of politics, we'll have all the environmentalists say things like there's absolutely no clean coal and all these kinds of stuff. I will not make those types of pronouncements because I am also an engineer. And there is a possibility that you can sequester all the bad things that come out of burning coal if we wanted to invest in the cost that would bring into the system. Environmentalists know that corporations don't want that cost, and as such, those regulations will never occur. So they put out the message, there is no such thing as clean coal. I think if we want to be very honest, we don't do that. We go ahead and immediately support whatever it is that won't contaminate the environment, if at all possible. Anyway, continue, please, my friend.
Okay, there's another thing. We worship oil, and I think they're bragging. I think they come out on television about we're going to be number one in not only in natural gas,
gas. Yeah,
but we're going to be number one in oil.
I think we already crossed
I
the
mean,
point.
I think we look at BP, what they did to pollute what happened
The Gulf.
in Louisiana and Alabama, those places. It just burns me up. I mean, and about this Lynch, what's her name, Loretta Lynch, being held up because of some abortion thing. Well, I'm one that is completely pro-choice. That is irrelevant. The whole thing is irrelevant about Heidemann. Heidemann was okay.
It's a Hyde amendment. Yeah, you're correct. Yeah, we should do that. Now I want to make a comment because Greg tells me that burning coal and oil and gas with sequester of CO2 isn't feasible. It's far more feasible to work on renewables. Look, I am with you, okay? I am. There's no doubt that I am with you on I would love us to simply work on renewables. As a pragmatist that I am as well, I am saying if some, we are a country full of private corporations that can do things. If somebody comes up with a technology, and that's why I'm saying, Greg, what I mostly want to say is, look, in a free society where people have the ability to invent, reinvent, and all these things, I don't want to clip anybody's wings. And we set the regulations as far as what we want. We want carbon neutral. If you can do certain things carbon neutral, and it's proven, go at it. Where I think a lot of times environmentalists defeat their own purposes, we defeat our own purposes, is when we get as rigid as the right gets with the policies they believe in. My thing is, let's let science move us forward. And I would much prefer getting all my energy by putting solar panels on my roof, by putting a windmill in my backyard, and by buying those batteries that the guy who makes the electric car, whatever that company's name is, I forget it. Tesla. He's supposed to have this year batteries that you can put in your home that will be able to store energy to power your own home. If you realize, one of the problems with solar energy and wind energy is that they're intermittent. But if during very high peak sun and high peak winds, you're able to store the excess energy, hey, then you're starting to look at a closed loop that'll work. So I'm for all of that. But likewise, if somebody tells me that they are able to somehow, let's see what Greg said, is able to do something, hey, I don't have a problem. Okay, I think, let's see, energy companies need to be taken over by the state. Hey, if you read my book, Greg, that is exactly what I said. I said there are three sectors that should be government control. Financing, meaning banks, utilities, vital utilities, and energy production. I wrote about that in 2010, so I believe that wholeheartedly, sir. But right now it isn't the case. Okay, John, do you have anything else to add to this? We have 6 more minutes of talk time.
Yeah, not too much, except I mean, there was talk about the Germans at one time with clean coal, and that never happened. That we stole the technology from them about clean coal. There is no such animal. That's what I understand.
Oh, I didn't know that we stole the technology from them. I didn't even.
No, there was talk that the Germans had a thing to make coal energy clean, and there was this, after like from the war, and that never materialized. So it's not true.
Okay. Yeah. Well, my thing wasn't whether it exists now or not. My thing was I didn't want to clip any wings who think they have the ability to create certain things. And Greg said, and I think I agree with that, yes, there are certain industries that we believe should be nationalized. I believe that as well. But by the same token, in a free society as well, universities and all the likes, I think it's fine for them to try to invent things, try to, that's what we're all about.
There is no such animal because, the United States has more coal than any other country. And if there was such an animal, we would have already shown it to the world.
Well, I will debate. I don't think that's true. You see, I think if we were ever to decide to regulate emissions, corporations go crazy because remember it costs money and it takes away from their bottom line. In other words, right now I don't know what they pay for coal, but I mean if they had to sequester carbon somehow and get rid of the mercuries and all that crap that coal throws up into the air, if they had to clean all that stuff up, according to Greg, it is completely right now unfeasible. I don't mean
clean it up. They were talking about from the Germans that the Germans had the technology where it would have been clean production. And that's never happened.
I don't know about that.
If I'm just saying, if it was true that the United States would have already done such, if we seized that information from the Germans after the war, because we have so much coal, we would have made sure that happens. That's
right. Well, I hear you. Now, I tell you, in my hopes, I really would wish. First of all, any of this would happen under the kind of budgetary constraints that we have, because our government has no interest. If you take a look at the Republican budgets, have no interest in having public investment in things to make society better. No interest in putting public investment in science. I mean, they don't even want to acknowledge that right now the world is in danger because of climate change. They don't want to acknowledge these things. That once you're working under these constraints, everything that we're speaking about is moot. So the reality is what folks have to start doing is exactly what we're doing here, right? Having a conversation, opening people's minds, having people think about things that they hadn't thought of before. And when they start to do that, many of the things that politicians say wouldn't have the effect that they have. I mean, if the type of rhetoric that the Benjamin Netanyahu uses in Israel and also uses over here would stop working. So we have to start informing each other. We have to start. What is the word that I want to use? Hanging with each other and realizing our common interest, if you will, because until we really do that, they can actually do exactly what they're doing, and that is put different ethnic groups against each other, different social groups against each other, different economic groups against each other, and by keeping all of that up, we get what we get. And then, of course, with them controlling the media, the mainstream media, that is, we get a populace that isn't quite informed. I wanted to say educated, but that's the wrong word, is informed. And that is one of the most important things we do here, or one of our intents to do here at Coffee Party, with the kinds of the stories that we share, the stories that we write, the stories that we keep abreast of. It is actually to increase that dialogue. And as our sphere grows, when I talk about spheres, I'm talking about things like an active page that can reach millions, a website that can reach thousands. As we build on that, we will be one cog in this whole scheme of things. Start informing. It's a slow process. But you know what? It's a worthwhile process. Another group that I work with called Move to Amend, where we're trying to amend the Constitution to say the same things that Coffee Party believes in. Money is not speech, and corporations are not people, or a corporation is not a person. We have a 10 to 15-year time that we're looking at to get these things effected. It's not going to be overnight, because the biggest and most important portion in getting anything done is first having folks informed. and educated. Yeah, you're correct, Greg. Until they're forced to by law for certain things. Yes, I agree. But again, we move forward slowly by first informing. If you take a look at our Facebook page where we talk to people and they sort some, they look at our messages and some get upset with the messages or whatever, and they post things that sometimes upset some of us and in the newsrooms or wherever. There's one important thing that I always try to tell folks. When you look at these pages, when you look at these information dispersers, most people say nothing. Most people say nothing. They simply observe. They simply listen. So it is incumbent upon all of us to keep talking, to keep putting messages out there, to keep doing it ad nauseum, because you do have followers and people are listening to you. They are listening to you, and you're planting seeds. You're planting a lot of seeds that you don't think you're actually planting. So when we sit down and we have these little talks and you may think we're not going anywhere, I can tell you from experience, we are slowly making progress. Now, I tell you, Jack, give me a quick 15-minute closer.
Okay, one thing that was not discussed was the like Twitter. Okay, with Twitter, just almost anything goes. I'm a very deep critic. I don't have a Twitter account. I don't care to. I just deal with Facebook if I deal with anything. Now, there's a lot of hate speech going on. I think free speech should be limited. The hate speech that comes out of people like ISIS and the extreme right wingers as a common core between. The only thing, the difference with the Tea Partiers. And then they were jackknifed by people like Gomert. I mean,
okay, Jack, I gotta let you go now, Jack. Thank you, Jack. I gotta let you go. I gotta run to John. But look, it's a pleasure having you every week, my dear brother. Keep calling in. Go ahead, and John, give me 15 seconds.
Well, real quick again. I think an hour show is not enough. An hour and a half, 2 hours.
Hey,
you always make my brother comment again.
Look, John, you'll always be my brother. Now, I want to say something that Greg Rosek just wrote. He said, we'll get there a lot faster without wasting time to convince the closed-minded. I agree with that, but I want to tell you that there are not as many closed-minded folk as you may think. A lot of people and I just had this conversation a few days ago. A lot when we had our stuff with our Move to Amend, we were having some problems in there with some affiliates, and the one thing that I did say is a lot of people that initially come across as closed-minded are really not. There are really some closed-minded ones, Greg. I agree with that wholeheartedly. However, there are really a lot of folks that come across as closed-minded that are not really closed-minded. They're just uninformed. And once you are able to break into that cycle with them, they become some of your strongest allies. They become your strongest allies when they realize, oh, my God, they've been open. I saw a whole lot of that at the panel I was on at Daily Coast. Believe it or not, ultra-liberal group, Daily Coast, with several folks that were there that were converted Republicans. When I say Republicans, I mean right-wingers that came out of the shell. So do remember that. Now, folks, please do remember that currently we have 3 radio shows, and they go as follows. On Mondays, or rather on Sundays at 8:30 a.m., we have I Take Liberty with My Coffee with Bobby Rodrigo. That's 8 a.m. Eastern Time. On Thursdays at 3 p.m. Eastern, we have Lunch with Loudon with Janine Loudon. And, of course, Saturdays you're here with me, Politics Done Right with Egberto Willies. And soon, I hope, we will be hearing the wonderful voices of new women and new men joining our conversation. Hear me, Greg? Hear me, Kathleen? And others? We want more shows of people putting their points of view out there because you know what? every single one of you represent the point of views of hundreds of thousands. My name is Egberto Willis with Politics Done Right. Have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful Saturday, and thank you for spending the time with me.